touch each other, please. They go right down deep, and they have collided. So both the BWT cars collide.
So it's an inside squabble between the two Williams. Looked to me like Rosberg tapped the back of Webber. That is absolutely the last thing any Formula One team wants to see.
That's Alesi and Heidfeld. I don't know what's happened, but it's the big poor Alain Prost, as if he hadn't got enough pressure on him.
We've lost a wheel. It's a racing engineering car that's ripped his left wheel off. Furious City's teammate. That will be a very fun team briefing.
Hello everyone and welcome to Teammate Collision, the one and only podcast of GPRejects.com. I am your host Lennart, and as usual I am joined by my very good friend Jeremy. How are you?
I'm doing alright. How was your Christmas, Lennart?
Oh, it was lovely. Seeing the family for the first time, just happy memories with everyone. As we all know, we aren't getting any younger, so any time with family is something I very much appreciate, so I'm happy to have had such a pleasant and otherwise pretty calm Christmas. What was it like for you?
It was alright. I spent it in Finland with the in-laws, but more importantly, we were absolutely raring to get back to do another podcast at the most important time of the year. It is the 1st of February today, and so far the biggest news in Formula One has been the Haas livery release. We really picked a good time for this when there's absolutely no news to happen.
And it is very kind of Haas to give us something to talk about, so thankfully we had some stuff to talk about prepared already just in case they weren't going to give us a actually pretty nice livery. So yeah, we are going to do the silly season review, so to speak. We are going to look at the silliest events of the silly season, both those that actually happened and those that merely were falsely reported as fake news. And for those that actually happened, we are also going to take a quick peek at whether all of our complaints about modern F1 are justified, or whether in the end we are just repeating the same cycle over and over again. Because it is always important to look inward on that stuff. As for all, both of us were nursing major headaches yesterday, so we must be sure that it's not just because of current F1, but just because of F1 in general.
We're still hungover from 2022. That we both had migraines at the same time, and the season's still over a month away. Yeah, I, like you, dear listener, will be listening and marveling in awe at the fact that Lennart is going to bring us not one, but possibly 2 or 3 pieces of actual F1 news during the duration of this podcast. I have a few incredible snippets of news which I found over the scouring of the internet recently, but I shall let you begin, Lennart, because I think you have a lot of news you want to get out there and tell the people of the Formula One GP Rejects community.
Yeah, I'd say we should begin with the one real event that sounds so fake it's hard to believe that it was real, but it was real, and that was the whole ordeal with Oscar Piastri. As for those who can't remember or who have chosen to forget about it, after Fernando Alonso had announced his switch to Aston Martin, Alpine, the Renault Works team, said that they would replace him with their young talent Oscar Piastri, but said Piastri then turned around and said, I ain't coming to you because I am going to McLaren, who, it should be noted, had at that time signed like 10 million drivers.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that, without going on a detour immediately, but was it Pato O'Ward or was it Alex Palou? Who was it?
I think it was Palou, but
yeah, we haven't even mentioned that Alex Palou as well, IndyCar champion, was also slated to be driving, who seemed to think for some reason that he was driving for McLaren in 2023, and basically cut all ties with his own team as well. So we had 2 simultaneous moments where drivers were cutting ties from teams who wanted them, both believing that they were driving for McLaren, but only one was.
Yeah, and in the end, there was a period where it seemed like everyone and their dog had a McLaren contract.
I believe Jacques Villeneuve was signed up for a seat.
Because unfortunately they didn't ask me. What a shame. Even though I wouldn't fit in either McLaren IndyCar or Formula One car, but that's no reason not to sign me, I'd say.
I believe the title for Jacques Villeneuve was Junior Vice Brand Ambassador for the for the engineering department.
Yeah, but of course, when we are looking back on history, even that is as ridiculous as the entire story was. It's most certainly not unique. We actually had one in rather recent history. After all, we can't forget about the 2015 Sauber debacle, where the team principal Mauricio Kaltenborn had signed 4 drivers for 2 seats, which, in case you are not good at math, doesn't add up.
We see in the old days they could have done that because they could have just weaseled out of the contracts and then shoved them in for certain races and done carousel merry-go-rounds. In the modern world of Formula One, especially in 2015, it's so boring that it doesn't. Drivers have contracts which both sides actually respect, and I think that's a terrible thing.
Yeah, so again, Sauber tried their best to bring us back to the old days and nearly got thrown out of the Australian Grand Prix for that, which would have been tragic given it was one of the best races of the season for them.
Yeah, it's also ironic that Mauricio Kaltenborn is originally comes from law. She came into Formula One from a law background. She was chosen, basically handpicked by Peter Sauber as his deputy for close to 10-20 years or so before she took over herself. So it's bizarre that we could do an entire article, an entire podcast about Mauricio Kaltenborn, but
so we should take it as a positive note that even when you're not from an engineering background or a motoring background or whatever you would normally expect as a Formula One team principal, it is always safe to assure that someone who really wants to get into Formula One will get into the carny spirit of things.
Yeah. The world of Formula One is too boring without those people. And
exactly.
You're going to have to refresh my memory here, because I'm aware that Felipe Nasra, Marcus Ericsson, and Guido van der Garde were all signed up. But who was the 4th?
That was Adrian Sutil.
Really?
Yeah, but I think his contract was about the weakest of the 4, but don't hold me to that. I am obviously not familiar with the contract structure of Sauber Formula One, so...
That's a real what if. Imagine all the 9th places that Adrian Sutil could have got in that car.
We will never know.
Imagine how much of a change to the would it have even been a drop in the ocean if the world had changed and Adrian Sutil had got that seat instead of Felipe Nasra.
That is certainly one of the contenders for the most meaningless what if in Formula One history. So,
I know nowadays Marcus Ericsson has got a little bit of clout because of that whole winning the Indy 500 and all that. But had he been replaced for 2015 by Adrian Sutil instead of getting the seat, would anyone have noticed the difference?
Possibly, but I wouldn't have bet on it.
Some kind of Nelson Mandela effect, change a piece of the past and see if anyone notices, see how long it takes.
Yeah, let's add in Wikipedia and see how long it takes for them to find out. And of course, the thing is, it's not even unique if you solely look at the driver's side on Piastri saying, no, I'm not driving for you, I'm driving for another team. Because we have 2 names in Formula One history who have done the same and very much altered the trajectories of their career. One would be Jenson Button deciding that he was going to go to Williams, but BAR saying no, and thus allowing him to stay at Honda and win the 2009 championship. Funny how that goes. And there's of course the famous case of John Alesi in having the Williams contract pre-signed, but because Sir Frank obviously wanted a more prominent name, let's put it that way, the announcement never came, so he decided to just say, screw this, and go to Ferrari, which obviously, again, changed very much the course of his career.
Yeah, and Alesi especially is fascinating because he himself was, in my opinion at least, Alesi really peaked in his first few years. I would make a really hot take and say that Alesi's last really good year was probably 1991, his first season at Ferrari. And from that moment on, he lost that extra edge he had, which made him so special in his first 2 years. But if he had gone to Williams in 1991, say he was alongside Mansell instead of Patrese, or even if he was with Patrese, I think he could have had a really, really good shot at the title, because he also would have had the motivation. We've gone on a bit this podcast about how Ferrari has something of a vampiric nature about it in draining the lifeblood out of talented drivers.
Yet another soul lost to the Ferrari cycle. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Button is an interesting one because Button's career doesn't really, because he had such a long career, it doesn't really follow a pattern. Like, you can't draw a line through his career with a clear arc. Like, you can't say that he got better or he got worse or whatever. He just had a long career, and so him instead going to Williams would have been interesting, but I think much less effective in the way that the lazy going to Williams would have been.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
just for his long-term career prospects at the very least, and the amount of change that he could have actually have made.
In the end, the prime question remains 2009. Would he have still been at Williams there? How would he have fared with that double diffuser Williams? Because they had that too. They just were the weakest teams of those who had it to make the most of it. And whether that is down to just being the weakest of Toyota, Braun and Williams, or just, well, Nico Rosberg and Kazuki Nakajima not being the most inspiring lineup in Formula 1 history is to be determined. Not really to be determined because we can't find out, but it is a point worth consideration.
We're going to answer this question.
Are we?
Absolutely not, no. But one thing that you sprung to mind actually was Michael Schumacher. If I'm not mistaken, his situation with Jordan was the same. My dad is a huge Michael Schumacher fan, and he always says it's a bit of a black mark in Schumacher's career, in that he and his lawyers or his agents and things really stinged upon Eddie Jordan and the money that they owed him for the contracts, which they didn't really pay him until something like the mid-90s. And that's an interesting situation where one driver was actually driving for two teams during one season, but only sitting in the car of one. It would have been interesting to have seen if Schumacher could have done anything in that Jordan, because obviously in 1992 he would have been picked up by Benetton anyway, and the history would have largely remained unchanged. But Schumacher in the 91 Benetton may have given Piquet a chance at another year, for example. It may have given Moreno a chance at a longer career. Who knows? Yeah,
the thing is, I don't want to take away too much from Moreno and to a lesser part Schumacher, because I'm going to go over them in examples of other relations to what happened in the actual world of Formula 1. But I surely agree, it's very interesting to know what he could have done, especially given as that was arguably the best Jordan until at the very least 1997. Well, 1996, sorry, my bad.
I have read some incredibly interesting news. Long-term friend reveals, quote, truth, unquote, about Verstappen. I read this fantastic article in the news today. I'm just going to throw some quotes here out of context, just so that they sound as damning as possible. Max is very Dutch in the way he communicates. This is the really gripping news in Formula 1, whereby someone who claims to have known Max Verstappen probably more than half of his life ago has said that Max Verstappen is misunderstood.
Oh my god, he's misunderstood.
That is about the extent of the article. What's your next piece of news?
Well, obviously the previous Piastri article ties into a part I've only been mentioning, and that is Fernando Alonso choosing to stay for a couple more seasons in Formula 1 and do so at Aston Martin, which, well, let's just put it this way. They weren't the top team of last season, and it is questionable whether they will be a top team this season.
Questionable in what sense? Who's questioning whether they're going to be a top team? Who thinks that they will be a top team this coming season?
Well, I guess Aston Martin, because gotta have optimism.
Is there a single person outside the Aston Martin garage who has made any prediction about the team being competitive in 2023? That's a serious question. Is anyone rating them?
If you do, please let us know in the comment. We are always happy to hear from you.
Don't dodge the question. You can't deflect to our listeners like that.
And of course, in a way, it's pretty unique because while there were a couple of drivers who did stay around as benchmarkers for a long time after their, or for a comparatively long time after the time at the top was cut short, was over, whatever you want to call it. But I don't think we ever had one where a driver was still as competent and gifted as Fernando Alonso is. Obviously, after I think we can still safely say that he won't have fallen off this badly in the winter, unless he has a lot of snacks on Christmas. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's funny because many drivers who, as you say, who have been successful, like everyone has their peak, and then they have most of the time, unless they get bored and retire early, which does happen occasionally. Most drivers, I'll say the majority, usually have a bit of an extended end of their career at some midfielder team. Felipe Massa, he got kind of like a late resurgence for a year at Williams, and then he too kind of fell off the cliff slowly but surely. Redeemed himself at the end in his unexpected final year. But I don't think there's really an equivalent that comes to my mind. Again, maybe you can correct me on this, to Alonso.
I openly admit I was stretching a bit because there are two that are similar in principle but different on various levels. And one example is Emerson Fittipaldi going to Coppa and staying there for, 5 seasons? Mm-hmm. But the main difference I feel to that one is Alonso is in the midfield pack because despite his talents, no top team is particularly interested in, partly because of his age and partly because, well, let's just say he engaged in a lot of bridge burning during his career.
Yeah.
Hate to say it, but it's true. So it's not quite a perfect analogy because, again, Fittipaldi chose to build Coppa, Andretti, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, especially Andretti. Fittipaldi, his team. I am so confused by the notion of Andretti making it to Formula One eventually that they are all over my mind, apparently.
There are too many Andrettis, there are not enough Andrettis. Or too many Fittipaldis, there are not enough Fittipaldis. Not enough Bravos, for that matter as well.
Yeah, so that is why the analogy isn't perfect, because, again, Alonso is not building a team in the sense that he is slapping his name on something and running it for himself because he wants something with his name out there, but simply because, again, he needs to go somewhere to build him up to a contender because the actual contenders, again, don't want him for various reasons. And the second example I have is Michele Alboreto, in the sense that he also stuck around for a very long time after Ferrari said goodbye. So, but the question is, I think you can answer a bit better than I can because you've been going over those seasons. Was he really the same dude that won in the mid-80s, that was the only challenger to Alain Prost's first Formula One championship in 94, 93, 92? That's the question regarding of how well this analogy works, actually.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, he's probably one of the closer analogies. Like the two drivers that come to my mind, which Alonso kind of incorporates both, is Jacques Villeneuve and Eddie Irvine. It's like if Eddie Irvine's post-Ferrari career was as long as Jacques Villeneuve's post-Williams career. That's my analogy, because Eddie Irvine was very smart with his money and managed to weasel his way into being the third highest paid person at the entire Ford company because of his experience in Ferrari. And he spent a couple of years earning a paycheck while running around, getting the occasional point and podium. As Jacques Villeneuve, as you mentioned as an example, built a team around himself with BAR, or at least a team was built around him. And I feel like Alonso has done both. Alonso had the McLaren Honda project, which was basically an entirely new concept. Ron Dennis was trying to do something completely different. Rather than beat Mercedes on their own terms, start a whole new engine project and relationship and do something together that way. Yeah. And Alonso was the lead driver in that project. And it didn't work out. And then Alonso moved towards the I'm just going to spend 2 or 3 years at this team with a huge paycheck while still being pretty competent, and then carry on doing it elsewhere. It's the fact that he's still so good is what makes it hard to compare.
Indeed, because everyone else either fell off or, again, just went out doing it because, or driving for whatever team they did because they wanted to. Obviously, as I said, Fittipaldi probably could have been a very good driver even in his later years, even though the whole building my own team didn't work out for him and he lost motivation both from the lack of the results and because it was affecting his personal life. And of course Villeneuve was eventually tossed out by the very same team he more or less built. So yeah, in the end Alonso is truly unique in that regard in a way. Obviously the principles are the same, but he has rearranged them in a very unique shadow pattern, which I actually don't see repeating in the future either, or at least not in that way. But
yeah, I mean,
that's for the future to decide.
The only person I could imagine repeating it would be someone like Sebastian Vettel, who's just retired. So unless Vettel were to make some kind of comeback after a 2-year absence, which is something Alonso did, then that's something which might be possible for him to do. But yeah, I mean, the only version I could think of, like the only analogy that would come to mind would be if Eddie Irvine had left Jaguar at the end of 2002 and then signed up with Toyota for 2 years and then become the third highest paid person at Toyota, which is probably a pretty good paycheck if I that's sort of what I understand.
I mean, given as if I recall correctly, Ralf Schumacher made over 50 million a year at Toyota, which again, if I can remember correctly, could actually be more or
50 million
less. Yeah, that's the number I remember hearing. So I am not 100% certain whether that was the number he got at Toyota or the one he got at Williams.
Surely that must be
because Williams wasn't.
Surely he didn't get $50 million. Surely it must have been yen. That's so much money. Okay.
Yeah. Schumachers are expensive.
Yeah, I suppose
God knows what Mick got. I don't even want to know what Mick got.
A thank you card.
Yeah, but that is Alonso. He is unique. And what is also unique are the very good sources you have. So let us hear what those sources say.
Helmut Marko. The Saudi F1 owners apply dodgy corporate standards, quote unquote. Helmut Marko has come out with an interview which is fiery to say the least, where he says such controversial things as, let's see here, drivers are responsible citizens who are in the global public eye and know how and what they have to say. In general, we are in a democratic society and everyone can express their opinion.
Whoa!
This is Helmut Marko's fiery interview where he says that why should drivers be banned from expressing their political opinion?
That was a nuclear attack, like straight up radiated the entire room here. I gotta get that guy a counter real quick.
Back to you. Unless you want more of this rubbish.
Well, I do expect more of the rubbish later, but for now we can go to a very short point, and that point is Nick de Vries getting his Formula 1, well, not for his Formula 1 debut, but his first full Formula 1 season at AlphaTauri. And honestly, the most noteworthy part about this debut is that he is a graduate of the main feeder series that didn't immediately get a drive, and unlike Piastri, didn't just spend his time as a simulator, but actually worked out a pretty nice short career in a different series, namely Formula E. Mm-hmm. And he was wise in getting out before Pascal Wehrlein could absolutely destroy him, but...
Yeah, it should be noted that Pascal Wehrlein tops the Formula E standings at the time of recording, and so this is a moment to cement that in history in the GP Rejects podcast, so that everyone who listens back to this will remember that there was a time when Pascal Wehrlein led the Formula E standings.
And Lennart gloated about it like the insufferable beef he is.
This is perhaps like a mean-spirited question, Leonard, but don't most of the drivers you support kind of fall apart just at the moment when you're supporting them, and then you double down?
Yeah, that is unfortunately a tradition they have sort of picked up. Though thankfully last year one driver spared me that, and that Rubens Barrichello actually managed to hold on to the lead of the 22 Brazilian Stock Car Championship.
I kind of walked into that one, didn't I? You had that one prepared.
No, that is just something I know because obviously, spoiler alert, possibly, don't know whether it's out, but the gravel trap for the month of February will deal with the Brazilian Stock Car Series, so obviously that fact is fresh in my mind for that purpose.
Of course it will deal with the Brazilian Stock Car Series, because what Formula One needs is more Rubens Barrichello coverage.
Most certainly do. It's a very good series, even outside of my personal investment in Barrichello's success in that. It's just great. And that is pretty much what the gravel trap will be about, how great it is and why you should watch it.
Okay.
But
so we got into this by Nick DeVries, who I'm looking forward to for this year to see how he does. A world champion coming to Formula One. When was the last time that happened? But
well, it depends on what you define as a world champion, because I have two examples of that which have won possible world titles. The more prominent one is obviously Juan Pablo Montoya, who won Formula 3000, but then spent a couple of years in America dominating the Champ Car Series. And, well, again, the question is, do you consider it a world championship? I personally would, because especially at the time they were driving a lot of races outside of the United States, so...
I mean, that's a difficult... Yeah, it's different these days, of course, because like the FIA are so stringent with their feeder series that you have to really go through Formula 2 or Formula 3, and however much they're considered world championships by the FIA, Formula E, IndyCar, NASCAR are some of the very few world championships, Super Formula as it's now known. Like, how many people have won those championships and come? I mean, I guess this brings us back. Pascal Wehrlein was the DTM champion in 2015,
yeah, exactly.
Was it?
But in 2015, but obviously that ties into the fact that you kind of generally need to convince Formula One manufacturer with those performances, because let's just say his DTM title wouldn't have gotten him in a Formula One drive if he had been driving for any marquee other than Mercedes. So,
but moving on, what I really wanted to talk to you about was Nick DeVries. Is he debuting in 2023? Because I read an article the other day which says, whose headline is Schumacher second F1 chance at Alpha Tauri ?
That would be the biggest.
This F1 article, this very legitimate article, is arguing or debating, or, well, I don't know what it's doing, but it's suggesting that Mick Schumacher could be coming right back to Formula One just when he had his both feet through the door via Alpha Tauri. In the second paragraph it says here, however, Helmut Marko last week admitted Red Bull Racing had assumed Schumacher would remain the property of the Ferrari Academy, and, quote, as a result, he was never really in our focus.
If only they had set him free earlier.
I don't know how the article manages to go on for another 15 paragraphs or so when it already it kind of just ends there, to be honest. It kind of contradicts itself. Schumacher, unfortunately, has not got the Alpha Tauri seat for 2023, but it was a great 2 paragraphs while it lasted.
I mean, they just had to convey the emotion of Marko not realizing that they could have had Mick Schumacher, that such a boisterous headline was necessary to really demonstrate the impact of Mick being caught in the Ferrari bondage. Oh my lord, what suffering.
Franz Tost muses on the fall from grace F1 has had with the German public when speaking today with Auto Bild. He believes Mick Schumacher could have, quote, become the new hero, unquote, for Germany. Quote, Mick's career determines the interest in Germany. Nico Hülkenberg cannot do it alone.
The sad truth of the matter is he is 100% correct on this. Because let's just say the public cared more about Mick Schumacher winning Formula 3 races than they ever cared about anything Nico Hülkenberg did in this country. No,
Yeah.
I could probably go out of the street and ask who is Nico Hülkenberg, and a very healthy number of people would not even know. So
See, the difference between me and you here, Lennart, is you know something about Formula One, and you're coming at this with an educated background of the subject that we're discussing. I'm choosing to do the opposite. What Franz Toast here is saying, not even implicitly but explicitly, is that Nico Hülkenberg is the new hero for Germany right now.
I mean, the assumption that I know something about Formula One is a very dangerous one, because I can surely name a couple of folks in our community who would not agree with that assessment.
Ah, dear.
Well, but Nico Hülkenberg is actually the perfect topic, because he's the second to last driver move I actually want to talk about. Because, yeah, Nico Hülkenberg is back. Hooray!
Who could have predicted? We were talking about flash fire, astonishing and game-changing, really, what-if moments in F1 history. And I think this is really a watershed moment with Haas, who have just unveiled their livery. It's absolutely the best of the liveries I've seen so far. And they have the ultimate lineup here of Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg, who I think between them, the best finish they've ever had in the championship in their combined 15 years or so in Formula One is about 7th or 8th in the championship.
Yeah, it sounds right to me. But yeah, it's certainly one of the lineups of all time. The thing with Nico Hülkenberg returning is that it obviously paints a pretty unflattering picture of the state of the Union series, that many teams would rather rely on these old horses that never rode really fast in their heyday. But, heyday horses. That is why I have the comparison to Hülkenberg is not so much a one-to-one comparison between him and the drivers I'm about to mention, but between the concepts of it. And my two examples are from 1995. And that would be first the return of Nigel Mansell to Formula One, the very short-lived one, and of course the appearance of Roberto Moreno at 40, after he had been out of the sport for 3 seasons previously.
Gosh, I completely forgot about Roberto Moreno's return. That's true. That's very true. He did come back. Hülkenberg, we did talk about, I think, in our previous podcast or the one before, that he is interesting in that he is probably the most determined driver who wants to be in Formula One, who until now wasn't in Formula One. It's not often, probably because it's just so damn expensive, but it's not often with the state of the feeder series, for example, being that you can't, when you've won the championship, you can't really hang around. Other than Oscar Piastri, there are very few drivers who want to be in Formula One as much as Nico Hülkenberg does until this year. And
yeah,
I can only really praise him for getting the job at Haas. I don't think either driver is going to finish higher than, here's a prediction, I don't think either driver is going to finish higher than 11th in the standings this coming year. That would be if they have a good year. But damn, you can't hate Hülkenberg for trying.
No, he's a very persistent man, and that is a positive quality if you are aiming that determination towards something positive. Being determined is bad when you're trying to do bad things, but hey, that's the philosophy course for today.
If it were Mick Schumacher in the same car and Kevin Magnussen were to have a good season in a good car and finish like 11th overall, Mick Schumacher would probably finish 16th or so in the standings. Nico Hülkenberg will probably finish 12th or 13th in the standings. They're probably going to be evenly matched, and they're probably going to take home a bunch of decent points finishes in the first few races, and then do bugger all for the next 27 races.
as is the Haas tradition. So in that case, I guess they would at least fit with the team they're driving for. So, but
we have strong words in the other direction though, because the chairman and CEO of MoneyGram, Haas's brand new, definitely long-lasting sponsor, which is going to be on the car in 5 years' time, just you wait, says that this is ushering in a, quote, brand new era for the team. And, I mean, with a driver lineup like Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg, you can imagine that things are really going to change.
The destiny of Haas has been forever altered. We will never recognize them for the team they were before this. So, yeah, I really feel the spirit MoneyGram is giving us with that, and I definitely do want to buy a MoneyGram snack bar or whatever it is they actually do.
It's just like, I feel like people want us to be annoyed about Nico Hülkenberg driving for Haas this year, but like I struggle to get annoyed because it's just like, it's so uninspiring. How can you even get annoyed at it? It's just like, it is the most boring lineup. They're both competent and neither of them are interesting. It would be like Nick Heidfeld and, well, let's bring it back again, Adrian Sutil driving for Haas 10 years ago.
Yeah. Like, it's basically just that. The thing is, I do have a lot of vitriol in my vitriol gland for Haas, but the thing is that has absolutely nothing to do with the drivers. Like, Kevin Magnussen is interesting, Nico Hülkenberg isn't, but he's competent, and so yeah, they are not. In a way, it really doesn't matter who drives that Haas because again, it's point. Haas.
It's a good point. Yeah, like who cares? Like, at this point, does Haas still have fans? Like, outside of people who have just switched on the first couple of episodes of Drive to Survive.
Yeah, probably those are the only ones left because everyone else, like, there aren't rejects, so we don't have a particular attachment to them. Nor do they do actually interesting rejectful stuff. Like, okay, they hired the one classic 90s style pay driver in recent years, but do they really score points for that?
I also like
some points.
It sounds like how you're also implicitly implying that there are only two types of F1 fans. F1 fans who are like everyone, and then us. There is no middle ground of people either. Neither of these two categories of F1 drivers, which encompasses 100% of the fan base, none of them are interested in Haas.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously that is a bit oversimplified, but who do Haas appeal to? Like, obviously not top team fans, because they ain't a top team and they never will be, I guarantee you that. They don't really appeal to the, well, for lack of a better word, Formula 1.5 crowd, because why care about Haas when you got McLaren and Alpine, for example? And they don't appeal to reject fans, so whom do they appeal to? Well, guys who die, like Günther Steiner saying stupid shit on Drive to Survive, but come on, that ain't an audience.
Yeah, like the joke value is never going to be permanent, and they don't even appeal to American fans because they've never ever had an American driver. So
indeed, and again, as I said when discussing this with other people, Americans, like most nations who have success in international sport, mostly care about winners first and foremost. This is not even particularly American, but this is just general. Only nations where there is just not that much sporting success are the kind of fans where they would say, oh, one of us is there, let's get hyped for him no matter what he does. But again, America has more than enough racing success over the decades, so they aren't going to be excited for Haas.
Yeah, they're in the position that they can be choosy, which many countries can't be. But hey, you said about race winners. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg won Le Mans 8 years ago. Kevin Magnussen won a sports car race 2 years ago.
I think he did, but
I mean, if that doesn't qualify him as a race winner in Formula 1,
I don't know what does.
I just think your standards are too high, Leonard.
Yeah, that is admittedly a problem I have. I'm very picky, especially since I like to root for drivers who, as we have noted earlier, tend to fall apart during the season.
I mean, who would you rather have, Nico Hülkenberg or Oscar Piastri?
That is a very good question. The thing is, at this point in their careers, I would say Piastri. The thing is, I am not saying he isn't. He's a good driver, that is for sure. But again, Formula One isn't the feeder series, as Nico Hülkenberg himself shows. Because if you will remember, he dominated everything up to Formula One. And well, so of course he's a big unknown, and within Formula One specifically, and of course, well, the feeder series he won both on the first attempt, if I recall correctly, just weren't that strong. But the thing is, he could be anything. He could be a Nico Hülkenberg, but he could even be more. Whereas Nico Hülkenberg, at this point, you know what you're getting with him, for better and for worse. And I would say, at this point, I would take the gamble on Piastri, and then, well, given that Hülkenberg is, as we have established, pretty persistent, he would be available next year if Piastri fails.
I mean, Nico Hülkenberg has like 3 or 4 fourth places in Formula One. And Oscar Piastri has never even finished a race, so it's pretty clear cut in my opinion. Would you rather have Nico Hülkenberg or Mick Schumacher?
Hülkenberg. That's not enough for discussion. With Mick, we know what he is, and what he is isn't good.
So Haas, at the very least, you must admit, therefore, have picked, at the very worst, the second worst driver in Formula One.
Good argument. Perfect argument. Flawless reasoning.
Which is a better choice than the worst driver in Formula One.
Indeed it is.
It's all about give and take.
Yep.
They're thinking of the long game, because as we all know, Haas are all about the long game. They're in their 8th season coming up now, longer than any of the reject teams from 2010, and gosh, do they not deserve it.
Yeah, they got to have the. They certainly have the right mindset for long-term success. Success in quotation marks. And who are we to bloody argue at this point?
Okay. Shall we continue with a piece of quote news unquote?
Yeah, suggest you do. So let's go.
I don't remember whose turn it is, so I shall go. F1 bosses plot to replace FIA president.
Dum dum.
This is the news that FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem has basically decided that, well, probably because it's January 1st of February right now and there's nothing else to do, is taken to Twitter to dictate and comment on FIA and Liberty Media policy instead of doing it behind closed doors, which for members of the public is great fun. He's basically made public that there was a potential buyout from unnamed Saudi Arabian investors to Formula One, and Sulayem basically went to Twitter and basically said that the potential investors overvalued F1 by the magnitude of probably many billions of dollars, which tended to make the people who might be quite interested in the franchise value, one might say, a little bit upset because F1 is, in the last couple of years, something of a money pot for a ever-closing, gatekeeping community of mafioso teams. And Ben Sulayem is kind of standing up against that, and this article here, with absolutely no evidence and no actual suggestions for what might happen, suggests that the Liberty Media may be getting rid of him. The article doesn't give any explanations of how they might do that, but they do say it will rock the foundations of F1. And
thing is, this is actually a fake news. Well, I don't want not covering up, but fake news spread over something that I think is actually going to be something big down the road. Because the thing is, between the time Ecclestone went out and Liberty Media came in, the FIA presidency, as held by John Todd, was pretty much irrelevant to what they were doing. they the relationship between the commercial rights holder and the sporting body organizing the Formula One World Championship has, for the most part, actually been either symbiotic or have been, yeah, you do whatever, we're just not along. And this could be the very first time since the 100-year deal that we don't have that type of management, where Mosley and Ecclestone more or less worked hand in hand to get the rights and the power, and to then use the rights and the power. And the period where Ecclestone did whatever he wanted and Todd nodded along, and then with Liberty Media did whatever they wanted and Todd nodded along, because that's what John Todd did. And now we are at a period where the commercial rights holder and the government body may have very different interests into the future development of the series, and I genuinely think, like, I don't actually believe this news. Like, they are not going to outright try to coup the guy, but let's just say when his re-elections come up, I would guarantee you that Liberty Media or whoever will own Formula One at that point will do something within their might to bring our current FIA president down, and obviously he will not be taking that lying down given his liberal use of Twitter. So yeah, I think we got a real firework brewing under that one. So I would dismiss this particular article, but I wouldn't dismiss the concept of it. So who knows?
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting and probably in a long-term positive things for F1 that they have such a vocal person who is just basically calling out what he sees as problems within the structural things of Formula One, which the public doesn't usually get to see. There are systems in place, and the systems are there for a reason, but not always for a good reason. And if I wouldn't necessarily say that Mohammed bin Sulayem was the hero we really want, but he's all we've got at the moment. I'd say he comes across for the time being as someone who is on the side of the regular fans and someone who's trying to at least keep some kind of spirit to what is going on.
Yeah. Obviously, we're saying that because he, in particular, we are saying that because he's looking to give us more teams and those more potential stories for rejects. But hey, we are not going to oppose him when he's speaking more or less in our interest. But I don't think he's actually saying anything most fans would actually disagree with. So
yeah, where this all goes is going to be quite interesting, but I don't really have much more to say than that. It's something where we're going to have to watch it and see if something does come of it, because I've most of these things usually flare up and they get corrected. Something comes along and it gets corrected. So much like Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton's complaining about social and political issues or whoever it might be at the time, I will praise this man if there is actionable change that comes from it.
yeah.
Before then, I will hold my tongue.
Yeah. The thing is, in the end, especially with the real big political stuff, is also generally the kind of stuff that, like, you get one or two rumors before it really goes down, and then boom, it explodes. So, as I said, this is something that will be brewing slowly. This is something, obviously, as I said, don't put too much currency into them trying to usurp the FIA president right now. But again, do keep your eyes on the next elections. I think they are 2025, but don't hold me to that. So yeah, that is the questionable source that actually has a very unquestionable point.
There's a grain of truth to every rumor. I would love to talk about Ferrari for at least a few minutes. because Ferrari have a new team principal, Mattia Binotto, who led the team to their runner-up in the championship, their best season in 5 years or so, got sacked. And he's been replaced by Frédéric Vasseur, who was previously the head of Alfa Romeo. Has said to the press, and this is a real quote, "No heads will roll" in the Ferrari makeover. So he has taken a team which has proven its incompetence beyond measure, both in management and in like the day-to-day logistics, and has said that no heads will roll. Whether that is true, whether that's just talk while 50 people get fired and replaced behind the scenes, we'll wait to see. But we're in for a wild ride if Ferrari are making absolutely no major staff changes between now and mid-March. Because Ferrari need to do something. At the very least, they need to look like they're doing something.
The thing is, he actually went a bit further into that. I don't know whether we had the same source or different sources, but he went a bit further into that and he made his argument that often operational failures are not necessarily a problem with the people, but with the structures around the people, which is in itself a solid argument because, again, Ferrari have gone through a lot of people since 2007, the last world title. They have replaced team bosses. They've probably, if I recall correctly, the Abu Dhabi 2010 failure led to a lot of heads rolling in the strategy department. And obviously they've gone through more than one aerodynamicist, I would wager as well. So in the end, they have probably already changed a lot in terms of personnel, but the results more or less stay the same, more or less stay, well, Ferrari. So I actually am not necessarily opposed to Vasseur's approach on that one, because Ferrari, I don't think they need so much personnel changes that they need to change their structures to be, well, I would say less Italian, but that would be kind of offensive, but you get the point. And that is why I think I am willing to give him a shot on this one, because, yeah, you can change a lot of heads, but when Ferrari stays Ferrari, Ferrari stays Ferrari. Tautology's rule.
It is possibly the most revolutionary strategy Ferrari have done since something like when they fired Luca de Montezello in 2014. Like, Ferrari making absolutely no changes, doing absolutely nothing, would be the most revolutionary thing they've ever done.
Yeah, in a way it would be, especially if they have the very bold idea to have the same people do different things. That would be very out there. That would be among the most shocking things we have discussed on this podcast, and as we have established, we had a lot of shocking things this off-season already. Okay, well, given as we are talking about people changing but everything staying the same, let's get to the topic of the United States in Formula One, because, well, there was a lot of drama, a lot of changes involving American drivers this silly season. And we begin with Colton Herta, whom AlphaTauri wanted to sign, probably instead of Nick de Vries, but the FIA, in their illuminated wisdom, decided that apparently just winning a couple of IndyCar races just isn't good enough to drive in Formula One anymore now.
Indeed. Colton Herta is not driving in Formula One. I think when I wrote my Sebastian Bourdais profile, which was coming on a year and a half, close to 2 years ago, there were lots of rumors, and it was generally accepted that he was the American name that was going to make it to Formula One. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but the year after. And now we actually have Logan Sargent driving for Williams, who's a relatively unknown name. So it's been an interesting turn of events, which I'm sure you will correct me or agree with me that it probably doesn't have a precedent in Formula One.
Well, at the very least, not in terms of getting a super license rejected despite being so obviously qualified. Yeah, I've dug through history, but history has said, what do you want from me? I don't have anything. So hooray for the FIA for making history. If only it was positive history, then we could celebrate it.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I can think of that they've denied someone their super license, or at least in this case removed their super license, was Yuji Ide, when he famously drove into Christian Albers at 100 meters before the 100 meters before the braking point, just decided to drive straight into him and calls him to do a barrel roll, and the FIA did not take kindly to it. Removed Yuji Ide's super license. But those days, super licenses were different. They were usually gained through the miles that you had done in an F1 car, when testing was possible to do basically every weekend. So nowadays that the super license points are gained from other series, it's absurd that the FIA are basically turned around and saying IndyCar, which is the second or third most watched series outside of Formula One in terms of motorsport in the entire world, basically doesn't count. It's not good enough.
Yeah, unless you are a dominant champion. The champion obviously has the same equivalent as, I think, the first 5 places in Formula 2. So yeah, if you win championships, you obviously get your super license. But if you don't, you don't. And if you are an IndyCar champion, or very much in the top X enough to get all those points, you probably don't want to muck around in an AlphaTauri.
Yeah, that's the main gist of it, isn't it? It's like
And while there are a couple of examples of drivers from other disciplines being denied super licenses, but none where the discipline was so close. Like Sebastian Loeb was penciled in for a one-off race at the 2009 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but obviously he was a rally driver, so it makes sense that the FIA would say, okay, yeah, driving a S2000 car on dirt is not quite the same as driving a Formula 1 car now, is it?
Which team was he? Which team was he dubbed to drive for?
Toro Rosso.
Really?
I do remember that. Let's hope I don't remember it wrong, but I am very certain that he was looking to drive for Toro Rosso, at the very least according to the dirt sheets. But yeah, as I said, that is a reasonable argument. Like, okay, we now know that Loeb is quite a talented road racer as well, but at the time, again, that is not something where I would say, oh, how dare you, FIA. When, again...
Who doesn't want to see Sebastian Loeb in a Toro Rosso?
But I think it was generally just meant as a one-off. But in this case, seriously, you could make the reasonable argument that at the very least at the top level of it, IndyCar can hang perfectly fine with Formula 1, given as Romain Grosjean didn't walk in there and immediately became 2-time champion, or how was he? I think he has been there 2 for 2 seasons now, right?
2 full seasons, I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, some guys who weren't quite top drivers in Formula 1 ended up winning the Indianapolis 500. Takuma Sato was a 2-time winner, Marcus Ericsson won it once, but still, it's not like these people were incompetent as Formula 1 drivers. So, yeah, it's just ridiculous, and especially if we are talking about the American driver that eventually made it to Formula 1, namely Logan Sargent. It's not like he was the kind of guy where you would say, yeah, this dude is better than the top of the IndyCar drivers. Not for the life of me.
No.
I could not get how you could think that.
Even I, contrarian as I am, I don't think I could make a strong argument in the case of Logan Sargent.
And the thing is, given as we are having a third race in the United States this season, the Las Vegas Grand Prix, which was confirmed last season, it is all the more surprising that Liberty Media wasn't lobbying more for Herta, because there were discussions about a special exception for him, which, of course, was denied. Perhaps they thought Logan Sargent is ready enough or good enough to be their marketable face, even though nobody in the US really knows him. And so interestingly, there is one connection tying Sargent to a really big name in Formula One history. And that is the fact that the commercial rights holder was very desirous of a driver from his nation. Basically what Ecclestone was reported to have said or believed is that he needed 3 drivers for Formula One to gain more commercial success. A black driver, a female driver, and a German driver. And obviously Michael Schumacher proved to be that German driver and made Ecclestone a lot of money with 2 German Grand Prix, or more precisely 2 races in Germany, the German and the European Grand Prix. And so, given as we have 3 United States Grand Prix, which obviously I don't even need to really put emphasis on the historical equivalent, because that's what pretty much the 80s were, where there was outright the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, also at Las Vegas, the not so successful one, and of course individual races in Detroit, Dallas,
Phoenix.
Then no, I think Phoenix. I was thinking Denver was one, but that was only ever an champ car race, so never mind me. So Phoenix. So yeah, obviously, Liberty Media must be very desirable for an American to sell to the American crowds, because Lewis Hamilton is very marketable in the United States. He's, as we have established, despite being Sir Lewis Hamilton, he's sometimes feels more American than British.
Yeah, he is half, considering like the people he hangs out with, that kind of vacuous Hollywood crowd. He's basically half American. Like, and he always kind of has been since like the late 2000s. When in his first 2 years, he was very like. He definitely got molded by the fame. Definitely, I would say, like late 2000s, early 2010s. I mean, he even went off the rails a little bit in 2010, 2011 with his like publicized relationship nonsense with hanging out with. Well, he still hangs out with vacuous celebrity morons, but especially like, yeah, I can get that he's very marketable in America.
Well, I could be mean and say that most Formula One drivers hang out with vacuous celebrities because they themselves are such.
Yeah,
but that would be
yeah.
mean.
But not,
no, but I obviously get your point.
Thankfully, not all of them make sweeping political declarations. But
yeah, and the thing is, but even if he is that, which we say he is, which he is, the thing is, he's not going to be around forever now, is he? Like, he said he wants a contract extension, but
like, if I may,
5 years, give him 5 years, give him 6 years, that stuff is going to run out, and I can't imagine they are planning on this Las Vegas Grand Prix just being a 3 year, okay, we gotta fill the calendar with something kind of deal, because again, the calendar is full enough, and it's not like they haven't other paying opportunities, which would be willing to pay quite a heavy amount more than I imagine than Las Vegas are doing.
Yeah. Like, if I may close this sort of topic a little bit by saying, like, the F1 they're pushing for America. That's where the money is. That's where the money is that they want at the time being. They have 3 races. They have a team which is American, but they don't have an American face. They don't have an American driver. And they had a fantastic chance with Colton Herta. And now all they have is Logan Sargent, who might be good. We don't know that. But what they've done is they've created a situation for themselves somewhat similar to Antonio Giovinazzi, where Giovinazzi was really just there because he was Italian. He basically got a free ride in Formula One because of where he came from, and because it was so marketable, in that case to his team, in that case to his sponsors, to have an Italian driver, he basically got a free ride for a couple of years. And although we do love our reject drivers on this website, would a Formula One fan prefer to have Colton Herta, who's like multiple race winner in IndyCar, or Logan Sargent? Well,
who probably won a few races, I wouldn't know.
But yeah, it's about the reputation and the potential. That can change. Give it 5 years and this will probably sound really outdated when Logan Sargent is an F1 champion and Colton Herta, I don't know, gets drunk and embarrasses himself by doing something lewd in public, and then we never hear of him again. You know, anything can happen.
Follows the NASCAR money and is a midfielder for insert NASCAR team here.
Anything can happen. That's my point.
Yeah.
But it's quite uninspiring for a series which is sure it could not make it more obvious that it's kowtowing to an American market. They couldn't do anything more really at this point to say, please America, give us your money. And Logan Sargent is what we got.
Plus, of course, it should be noted that even that I don't even think it's a betrayal of the reject spirit to want Herta over Sargent, because if Herta fails, he would make for a much more interesting profile, I'd say.
I would agree with that.
So, yeah, but I get your point. It's just a bit, well, I don't want to say sad, because it would pretty much just amount to a large corporation sabotaging its ability to make more money, but yeah, it's just...
What a terrible shame.
Farting noise. A giant farting noise, if you will.
Alright, next subject.
Well, that was actually the last one. We did kind of the giant sweep, so... Do you have some fake news to... Oh, cut that out.
Do I have some fake news? Excuse me.
Yeah, let's cut out that entire part, and then yeah. No, as for my side of no, those were the most interesting part of the actual silly season. But obviously, you have more reputable and more detailed sources than me. So, do you have anything I did not mention yet?
We've really picked the worst possible time to do a podcast, because in terms of current modern day news, there really isn't very much to talk about. The biggest news in Formula 1 really is that Haas have unveiled their car and what it might look like in the season. So I think the stuff which is silly, the stuff which is all questions, all hearsay, all what might happen, is really, really interesting sometimes, and I'm happy we got to talk about it. Let's see where Logan Sargent ends up. Let's see if Ferrari are exactly the same last year as they will be this coming year. Let's see if Mick Schumacher really does drive for AlphaTauri. Let's see if Nico Hülkenberg really is the second worst driver in Formula 1. Whatever sweeping statements can we make? Let's see if Logan Sargent is the Antonio Giovinazzi of America.
Or if he's the Michael Schumacher of America.
Let's see if...
Anything is possible.
Let's see if the Las Vegas Grand Prix really is the greatest Grand Prix experience of all time. What was it they said again?
I think it was something along those lines, but let's see whether it's that or the worst Grand Prix experience of all time, because I think the city of Las Vegas is really going to not want to have that to say again after the Caesar Palace Grand Prix. Beautiful word. Yeah, but as you said, we are we looking forward? We are expecting a very long season with a lot of silly stuff, both on the track, off the track, as is tradition. As we have established in this podcast, has always been Formula One's tradition to always embrace its own silliness a bit. And once again, it shows that just like in all other sports, the transfer period, the free agency window, the silly season, whatever you want to call it, is really one of the most beautiful things there is.
Indeed. And just so the folks at home are aware, we are not... we are aware of the irony of the vacuous morons making platitudes comment that I made earlier, and how it relates to us. So yeah. I hope you have enjoyed our...
Yeah, especially our American listeners will certainly know that we are just pulling their leg a bit.
Should GP Rejects cater more to an American audience, Lennart?
We are all about freedom, after all. The freedom to be not good at Formula 1.
I feel like there's a market which GP Rejects hasn't really tapped yet. We're gonna... My next 10 profiles in a row... No. We're gonna have three American GP Rejects profiles this year. And they're gonna be the greatest profiles. They're gonna be the greatest profile experience you've ever read.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light And I don't know the further text of that.
How do you know any of the lyrics off by heart of the American national anthem?
I follow American sports, you learn.
Okay, before we waste...
I also can the other one. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies. And again, I don't know the further. Oh my god, we had an American audience, it's gone by now.
We shall close this podcast very quickly now before we waste any more of our audience's time. Thank you very much for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to Moneytron. What was it called? MoneyGram.
MoneyGram, yeah.
And their loan shark deposit schemes of some kind. I would steer well clear of that website if I were you. I wouldn't go anywhere near it.
All I know is that I want a MoneyGram bar.
We look forward to...
they were selling snacks, right? I don't know.
We're gonna.
I think that joke will
I am hereby pushing the eject button on this podcast. We hope to see you, hear from you, or you hope to hear from us. We hope to. Goodness, even my language is falling apart now.
We are just so amazed at the Haas liveries that we can't speak anymore. As Jeremy said, we are hoping to hear from you soon. Do feel free to always read our articles on gprejects.com, and we hope to have you listening to us again next time on the Teammate Collision podcast. And always remember, where teammates are close, teammates collide.
And we're back. You thought you'd got rid of us after our ramblings just a few minutes ago, but we're already back because upon finishing the recording of this podcast, we discovered that today, just as we were recording our episode, Mick Schumacher has signed for McLaren in a third driver role capacity. Lennart, what do you think of this news that you've just gleaned about 30 seconds ago?
I am completely shocked. This came out of nowhere. I didn't expect Mick Schumacher to join the long list of people who have signed a contract with McLaren, but hey, good for him. Means he can work on in the simulator and see two drivers that are more talented than he is do their thing.
But Daniel Ricciardo is not driving for McLaren anymore. What are you talking about?
Ooh.
Yeah, we just wanted to put that at the end of the podcast so that you, so we don't get questioned why that wasn't brought up. Not that anyone even remember this news. Probably 2 hours after it's happened, but yeah.
Plus, we got even an additional spicy quote because Fernando Alonso said that he wouldn't have continued in Formula One if he didn't think he was driving at his best, and if Aston Martin didn't have any chance to win. So, regarding the earlier point, whether anyone believes Aston Martin is some sort of contender for wins for 2023, well, we got an answer now, do we? He heard us. I bet he heard us. I guarantee you that. Even though that podcast was never released, he's spying on us.
Absolutely. I mean, it just goes to prove just how on the button we are with our subjects. And on that note, we're actually going to go now, so goodbye, and see you probably at the end of February or sometime in March.